She's not breaking down, she's performing.
Want to see how far someone will go to destroy everything you built?
Want to see something that'll make your blood run cold? Try watching your wife practice crying on command in front of the bathroom mirror at 2 in the morning. That's precisely the sight greeting me on my security monitor when this whole mess started to unravel. My name's Kyle Patterson. I'm 43, and I've been running Patterson Freight Solutions here in Memphis for the last 9 years. Built it up from my dad's old delivery truck after he passed. Heart attack at 58, right there in the cab of that beat-up Ford. Now we're running 18 trucks and grossing around $2.8 million annually. Not too shabby for a guy who started with a single vehicle and a mountain of unpaid bills. But let me rewind back to that bathroom mirror scene, because that's when I realized Brielle wasn't just having some garden variety midlife crisis. She was rehearsing. Standing there in her pajamas, contorting her face into a picture of sadness and vulnerability, then checking her reflection to see how it looked, then doing it all over again, different angle, different expression, like she was getting ready for an audition. I'd installed the Hikvision DS7608NI K2 system about 6 months prior. 8 4K cameras with night vision, a 4 2TB network video recorder, automatic backups to AWS S3 every 24 hours with 256-bit encryption. The insurance company knocked 15% off our premium for having it. That's about $3 grand in savings annually on a business with equipment worth over $2 million. The whole setup cost me around $4,000, but when you're running freight operations across 3 states, that ROI pays for itself in the first year. The cameras weren't intended to capture my wife practicing fake emotions. They were for security after we had a break-in at the warehouse where someone tried to steal copper wire from our refrigerated units. But here's the catch with modern security systems. They record everything in common areas, and that includes the hallway outside our bedroom where she thought nobody could see her. Brielle and I had been married for 8 years. We met when she was working as a paralegal at Patterson Miller Associates downtown. No relation to us, despite the name. She was smart, ambitious, and had big plans. Said she wanted to go to law school someday, maybe even start her own practice. I supported that dream wholeheartedly. Paid for her LSAT prep course twice, helped her apply to 3 different schools, including the University of Memphis and Nashville School of Law. None of them panned out. Her scores were decent, but not great, and law school is a serious financial commitment. After that second rejection, she just stopped working entirely. Said she was exploring other career options while figuring out her next move. Those career options seemed to involve spending 8 hours a day on real estate websites and having long phone conversations with lawyers about asset protection strategies and business valuation methods. When I inquired about it, she said she was researching investment opportunities for us. Maybe we should diversify into commercial real estate, she suggested. It seemed logical at the time. Freight companies need warehouse space, and Memphis has a lot of undervalued commercial properties near the riverfront. The freight business had been exceptionally good to us. We started with local furniture deliveries for 3 shops in Midtown, and now we handle LTL freight for FedEx Ground, 2 major appliance distributors, and we just landed a contract with a medical supply company that ships throughout the Southeast. Last year, we cleared about $400,000 in net profit after expenses, taxes, and equipment loans. And that doesn't even factor in the appreciation on our truck fleet and the warehouse property we bought back in 2019. But here's what most people don't grasp about logistics. It's not just about moving stuff from point A to point B. You're constantly dealing with DOT regulations, commercial driver's license requirements, fuel hedging when diesel prices fluctuate 20% in 6 months, insurance costs that can eat up 10% of your revenue, and driver turnover that's hovering around 30% industry-wide. We've been fortunate to keep ours around 15% because we pay above market rates and offer health insurance. The competition is fierce too. You've got mega carriers like XPO and JB Hunt that can undercut you on volume pricing, local outfits who'll work at cost just to keep their trucks on the road, and new tech companies trying to Uberize freight shipping. Plus, you're always one accident away from a lawsuit that could bankrupt you if your insurance coverage isn't airtight. But success can change things between people. Brielle started asking different questions about 6 months ago. Why wasn't her name on the business accounts? Why didn't she have more of a say in major equipment purchases? I explained that it was cleaner for tax purposes, kept the corporate structure simple. Dad had set up the LLC that way back in 2003, and our accountant, Ray Spencer, advised against changing it unless we had a compelling reason. Tennessee has favorable laws for single-member LLCs, and adding a spouse can complicate things if anything were to happen. That explanation wasn't sufficient anymore. She wanted a complete understanding of our financial situation, not just the household budget, but business cash flow, asset values, depreciation schedules, the whole 9 yards. Fair enough. Couples should communicate about money. But when your wife starts inquiring about business valuation methods and whether equipment loans are personally guaranteed, that's beyond casual curiosity. That's someone seeking advice from professionals. Her strange behavior intensified over about 3 months. Phone always face down during dinner. Conversations that abruptly ceased when I entered the room. She'd position herself oddly during arguments, as if she were performing for an unseen audience. Always with that expensive leather purse, too, never more than 3 feet away from her. The same purse we'd argued about when she bought it for $1,500 without consulting me. I'm a practical guy. When something doesn't add up in business, you audit the books. When equipment starts making strange noises, you dismantle it to find the problem. When your wife starts acting like she's auditioning for a role in some drama you've never heard of, you try to figure out what's going on. So I started scrutinizing the security system logs. The Hikvision software tracks every login, every file accessed, every recording downloaded. That's when I discovered Brielle had been accessing the recordings. A lot. The system showed her username logged in at all hours. 2 in the morning while I was asleep. 3 in the afternoon when I was at the warehouse dealing with a broken hydraulic lift. She'd been systematically going through weeks of footage, downloading specific segments, and creating her own copies of our arguments, storing them on her laptop. I opened one of the files she'd saved and immediately knew we had a serious problem. It was from a fight we'd had about money, specifically her purchase of that $1,500 purse without discussing it with me. In the original 20-minute recording, you could hear the complete context. I'd come home from dealing with a driver who'd been involved in a minor accident on I-40, spotted the receipt on the kitchen counter, and asked if we could discuss significant purchases beforehand. We were reinvesting most of our profits back into new equipment. We had our sights set on 2 Kenworth T680s that would enable us to bid on longer hauls, and cash flow was always tight in the logistics business. The conversation started calmly. I explained my concerns about the UPS regional contract we were bidding on, $500,000 over 2 years, but they were particular about financial stability. They wanted to see consistent cash reserves and low debt-to-asset ratios. A surprise $1,500 purchase wouldn't break us, but it was the principle of the thing. She became defensive, accusing me of treating her like a child who needed permission to buy anything. I attempted to explain that wasn't the issue. We simply needed to coordinate on spending to avoid overdrawing the business accounts when I had payroll coming up. Things escalated from there, as they often do when you're both tired and stressed. But the file she'd saved only captured the final portion. My voice raised in frustration, accusing her of being irresponsible with our money. Her crying, asking why I was being so cruel to her. None of the context that led up to that moment. She was selectively editing our fights. I spent the next 3 hours reviewing every file she'd accessed, the same pattern repeated each time. Arguments that lasted 20 or 30 minutes were compressed into 2-minute clips that made me appear to be some controlling maniac who screamed at his wife for no apparent reason. The security system I'd installed to protect our business was now being weaponized against me. The most disturbing part was realizing how deliberate it all was. I discovered footage of her reviewing previous recordings on her laptop, meticulously noting which phrases elicited the strongest reactions from me. There was even video of her on the phone with someone, presumably a lawyer, discussing which clips would be most impactful in court. But the smoking gun was a conversation I'd completely forgotten about. 3 months earlier, when she thought I was at the warehouse dealing with a refrigeration unit malfunction, she'd invited her friend Ashley over. They discussed her divorce strategy in detail, right there in our living room. "The key is getting him angry on camera," she told Ashley. "Make him say things that sound threatening. Judges eat that stuff up, especially when it's a successful businessman going up against a seemingly scared wife." Ashley inquired if she felt guilty about lying. "It's not lying if he really is controlling," Brielle retorted. "I'm just helping the truth come out in a way people will understand. He makes all the money decisions. He bought this house without consulting me. He runs that business as if I don't exist." The conversation lasted 40 minutes. She outlined her entire plan, from the initial recordings to the final courtroom performance. She even discussed how much she expected to receive in the settlement. Half of everything, plus monthly support that would essentially equate to my entire salary, and what she intended to do with the money afterward. "Maybe move to Nashville," she mused. "Start fresh somewhere nobody knew about the divorce." I had it all on tape. Her conspiracy, her manipulation, her calculated fraud. The only remaining question was how to present it without appearing as though I'd been spying on my wife. That's when I contacted Earl Thompson. Earl's been in the logistics business for 3 decades, having built Thompson Distribution from 2 trucks into a $50 million operation before selling out to XPO in 2018. He's also been through 2 divorces, both messy and expensive. If anyone could understand what I was facing, it was Earl. We met at his favorite barbecue joint on Beale Street the following day. I laid out the entire situation, the recordings, the editing, the conversation with Ashley. Earl listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. "Son," he said when I'd finished, "you're in a world of hurt. But you might also possess the most compelling evidence I've ever encountered in a case like this." He pushed his plate aside and leaned forward intently. "The question is, are you prepared to fight? Because once you embark on this path, there's no turning back. She's going to come at you with everything she's got." Earl had battled his second wife, Linda, for 3 years over his business assets. She'd claimed emotional distress, asserting that the stress of being married to a workaholic trucker had induced anxiety and depression. It cost him $2 million in the settlement, plus another $500,000 in legal fees. "The difference is," Earl explained, "you have proof she's lying. I only had my word against hers." He gave me the contact information for his attorney, Wade Miller, who'd handled both his divorces and knew every legal maneuver in the book. "Wade's expensive, but he's worth it. Tell him I sent you." I also spoke with Brett Sullivan, my operations manager who'd been with the company for 4 years. Brett had worked his way up from driver to dispatcher to operations, possessing an intimate knowledge of the business. More importantly, he'd witnessed how Brielle behaved around the office during her occasional visits. "Boss, I don't want to overstep," Brett said when I inquired about it, "but your wife never seemed happy about the business's success. Most wives would be proud, you know. But she always acted like the company was competition for her attention." Brett had also observed other things. How she'd ask detailed questions about our contracts and revenue when she thought I wasn't within earshot. How she'd subtly pump our drivers for information about routes and customers. At the time, we'd all assumed she was simply trying to gain a better understanding of the business. She asked me once about the insurance policies, Brett recalled. She wanted to know if you were covered for disability and what would happen to the business if something happened to you. Said she was concerned about your health with all the stress you were under. That conversation had occurred 2 weeks before I installed the security system. Now, it all clicked into place. She wasn't concerned about my health. She was conducting research. I called Wade Miller that afternoon. He agreed to meet with me the following day, warning me that his retainer was $15,000 up front. Fair enough, I thought. If Earl trusted him with a $50 million business, I could certainly trust him with mine. But first, I had some preparation to do. I spent the entire night backing up every file from the security system to 3 distinct locations: the AWS cloud storage, a local hard drive I kept in our office safe, and another drive I entrusted to Earl's safekeeping at his house. If Betrayal intended to manipulate recordings, I'd ensure I possessed all the footage, not just the selectively edited highlights she believed would serve her agenda. 3 weeks later, she made her move. I arrived home to find the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, accompanied by a note stating she was staying at her sister's house until I moved out. The petition was 12 pages long, filled with detailed accusations of emotional abuse, financial control, and creating a hostile living environment. She was seeking half of the business, the house, both cars, and monthly support payments that would essentially drain my entire salary, plus attorney fees. The language was harsh. According to the filing, I was a manipulative businessman who used his success to intimidate and isolate his wife. I controlled every aspect of our finances, prevented her from pursuing her career goals, and fostered an atmosphere of fear through verbal threats and intimidation tactics. Wade Miller meticulously reviewed the filing while I anxiously waited in his office, occasionally making skeptical sounds. "She's claiming video evidence," he finally stated. "Says you threatened her on multiple occasions and that you installed surveillance equipment to monitor her activities." My stomach plummeted. I knew exactly which recordings she possessed. "Can she do that?" I asked, my voice laced with apprehension. "If she can substantiate these claims, possibly. Tennessee isn't a no-fault state when it comes to asset division. Abuse changes everything." He flipped through the pages thoughtfully. "But Kyle, I've handled cases like this before. The critical factor will be context." Within a week, our joint accounts were frozen. Betrayal's attorney, Lisa Hoffman, had filed an emergency motion asserting I might conceal assets or retaliate financially against my wife. The judge granted the motion pending a full hearing. I was forced to borrow money from the business account to pay my own lawyer and cover basic living expenses. That's when the business ramifications truly began to manifest. News travels quickly in the logistics industry, especially in a city like Memphis where everyone is interconnected. Our dispatcher started fielding calls from drivers inquiring about the security of their paychecks. 2 of our largest customers, the medical supply company and one of the appliance distributors, began asking questions about our financial stability. The UPS contract we'd been negotiating for 6 months abruptly stalled. Their procurement manager, who had previously been enthusiastic about our bid, stopped returning calls. Brett pulled me aside one morning and revealed he'd heard through the grapevine that they were apprehensive about working with a company whose owner was embroiled in a messy divorce. "Boss, the guys are worried," Brett confessed. "They're hearing rumors about frozen accounts and court battles." Some of them are already receiving calls from Memphis Freight Solutions offering them jobs. Memphis Freight Solutions was our primary local competitor, managed by a guy named Tommy Gates, who'd been attempting to poach our contracts for the past 3 years. He had a reputation for employing underhanded tactics, underbidding us just enough to steal accounts, then subsequently raising prices once he had the business secured. Earl Thompson called me that same week. "Son, you need to understand something," he emphasized. "In this business, perception is everything. Your customers need assurance that their freight will move on time, every time. If they begin to suspect you're distracted by personal issues, they'll seek out an alternative." He was right, and that realization made me angrier than I'd been since this entire ordeal began. I'd dedicated 16-hour days for 9 years to building this company. I'd missed family dinners, forgone vacations, and declined social engagements to ensure every delivery was punctual and every customer was satisfied. Now, Betrayal was attempting to dismantle all of that with lies and selectively edited video clips. Her strategy became apparent over the following month. Lisa Hoffman was recognized as one of Memphis's most aggressive divorce attorneys. She specialized in high-asset divorces involving claims of emotional abuse, and her track record was impressive. She'd secured a construction company owner's ex-wife half of his business, plus $1 million in cash. Another case involved a restaurant chain owner who ended up paying alimony for 15 years. They demanded mediation prior to trial, confident they held all the leverage. The session was scheduled for a Friday afternoon at Hoffman's office. Betrayal sat across from me, wearing makeup that accentuated the shadows under her eyes, giving the impression she hadn't been sleeping. She avoided eye contact, flawlessly portraying the traumatized wife. Hoffman spread documents across the conference table as if she were dealing cards. "My client has documented a pattern of escalating abuse over the past year," she announced. "We possess recordings that unequivocally demonstrate Mr. Patterson employing intimidation tactics and verbal threats to control my client's behavior." "We'd like to review those recordings," Wade countered. "In due course. First, let's discuss a fair settlement that acknowledges the trauma my client has endured." Half of the business, which they valued at $1.8 million based on some consulting report they'd commissioned. The house, both cars, even Dad's old pocket watch that Betrayal had always dismissed as worthless, but which apparently had been appraised at $3,000. In exchange, I'd be permitted to walk away without a lengthy trial that would expose our private business in public court. "That's not a settlement," Wade asserted. "That's extortion." Hoffman smiled coolly. "That's justice for a woman who's been silenced for too long. My client is prepared to testify about years of psychological abuse, financial control, and intimidation. The recordings speak for themselves." The mediation failed. Trial was scheduled for 6 weeks later. During that time, Betrayal played her role to perfection. She commenced therapy for trauma recovery with a psychologist specializing in domestic abuse cases. She obtained a restraining order that forced me to relocate to a Hampton Inn near the airport. She posted carefully crafted social media updates about finding her voice and breaking free from toxic relationships. The Memphis Business Journal published a brief article about the divorce filing that mentioned the abuse allegations. Nothing detailed, but enough to prompt inquiries from people within our industry circles. I started receiving those knowing glances at Chamber of Commerce meetings, the kind that implied people were wondering what had really transpired behind closed doors. Meanwhile, I spent every evening in that sterile hotel room meticulously reviewing our security footage with a legal pad and stopwatch, documenting every conversation she'd recorded, noting what she'd included and what she'd omitted. Wade had hired a digital forensics expert named Dr. Susan Andrews, who specialized in analyzing video evidence for court cases. Dr. Andrews corroborated what I already knew. The files Betrayal had saved were edited versions of longer recordings. She could prove it through metadata analysis and timestamp verification. More significantly, she could demonstrate that the original files still resided on our security system's backup servers. 2 days before the trial, Wade called with news that sent my blood pressure soaring. They filed additional evidence. Video footage of you threatening to make her pay if she ever left you. I vividly remembered that argument, and I knew exactly how damaging it would appear. We met at Wade's office that evening. He pulled up the video file on his laptop. There I was, standing in our living room, pointing at Betrayal and declaring, "If you walk out that door, you're going to pay for it. I promise you that." It looked terrible. Sounded even worse. My face was flushed with anger, my voice raised and aggressive. Betrayal cowered against the wall, tears streaming down her face, appearing genuinely terrified. but I clearly recalled what transpired next. After uttering those words, I'd immediately apologized. I explained that I meant she'd regret missing her sister's wedding, not that I'd somehow retaliate against her. We'd talked it through, eventually laughing about how we'd both overreacted to the stress surrounding the wedding. "Where's the rest of it?" I demanded. Wade paused the video. This is what they submitted. About 90 seconds of footage. The argument lasted 20 minutes, and I apologized immediately afterward. That's when I realized Betrayal had made a critical error. She'd been so preoccupied with creating incriminating clips that she'd overlooked something crucial about our security system. "I have access to the original files," I stated. "Not just the copies she downloaded and edited, but the raw footage from the security system's main server. Everything is automatically stored on an external AWS server for insurance compliance purposes." Wade leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Complete versions of what?" "Every conversation she recorded, every argument she edited, the full context she's been excising to make me appear abusive." The trial commenced on a Thursday morning in October. Judge Patricia Wells presided. She had a reputation for fairness, but possessed little tolerance for deception or manipulation. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the case, and several local business owners had attended to witness how it would unfold. Earl Thompson was present, seated in the gallery with two other logistics company owners who knew my reputation. Brett Sullivan had taken the morning off work to testify if necessary. Even Dr. Andrews, our digital forensics expert, was prepared with her analysis equipment. Lisa Hoffman presented Betrayal's case first, painting a picture of escalating abuse supported by carefully selected video clips. Each recording was damning when taken out of context. Me yelling about money. Me slamming a door during an argument. Me telling Betrayal she was being unreasonable and selfish. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hoffman proclaimed during her opening statement, "you're going to witness and hear evidence of a pattern of psychological abuse that escalated over months. Mr. Patterson exploited his business success and financial control to intimidate and isolate his wife." Betrayal took the witness stand, dressed in a conservative dress and wearing minimal makeup, perfectly embodying the role of the recovering victim. She spoke softly about feeling trapped in a marriage with someone who controlled every aspect of her life. "He installed those cameras everywhere," she testified, her voice barely above a whisper. "Said it was for security, but it felt like surveillance, like he was watching my every move, waiting for me to make a mistake." Hoffman played the threatening video again. "Can you tell the court how you felt when your husband said these words to you?" "Terrified," Betrayal whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I knew he meant it, that he'd find a way to hurt me if I tried." She was about to leave. The performance she gave was truly flawless. Even I, sitting there at the defendant's table, almost fell for it. She had spent months meticulously practicing her testimony, perfecting every single gesture and the way she inflected her voice. Then Wade started his cross-examination. He started off slowly, just asking some basic questions about the security system. When it was put in, why it was put in, and who was in charge of keeping it running. He made sure everyone understood that I was the one who paid for it, that I had set it up myself, and that I had full access to all the recordings. "Mrs. Patterson," Wade said, "you testified that you felt these cameras were installed to watch you. But isn't it true that this system was installed after a break-in at your husband's business warehouse?" "I suppose, but..." "And isn't it also true that similar systems are pretty standard in the logistics industry to meet insurance requirements?" Hoffman objected, but Judge Wells let the question stand. "Mrs. Patterson, have you ever looked at any of the recordings from this security system yourself?" That's when her carefully constructed composure started to fall apart. She looked over at Hoffman with a panicked expression in her eyes. "I don't understand the question." Wade then pulled out the access logs that Dr. Andrews had analyzed. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence showing that Mrs. Patterson accessed the security system 47 times over a 6-month period, downloading and editing specific recordings. Objection, Hoffman shouted, standing up. This is irrelevant to the abuse allegations. On the contrary, Wade responded, it's directly relevant to the credibility of the evidence she's presented. Judge Wells took a look at the logs. Objection overruled. Continue, Mr. Miller. That's when Wade played the first complete recording, the heated exchange about her sister's wedding, but this time he included my immediate apology and how we reconciled afterward. With the full context included, it was clear that I was talking about her missing a family event and not threatening any kind of retaliation. As you can see, Your Honor, Wade explained, the defendant's words were taken from a longer conversation where he clarified what he meant and apologized for the way he spoke. The plaintiff's version deliberately removes this context. We went through each recording in a methodical way. Every edited clip was followed by the complete conversation. Every accusation of abuse was followed by evidence of manipulation and provocation on her part. But the real bombshell came when Wade played the recording of the conversation Betrayal had with Ashley. Her own voice was on the recording, discussing her plan to make me look unstable so she could take everything she thought she deserved. The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Wells asked to review the recording herself, listening with headphones to make sure she heard every single word clearly. Now, the key is getting him angry on camera, Betrayal's voice said through the courtroom speakers. Judges eat that stuff up, especially when it's a successful businessman going up against a scared wife. Hoffman tried to object, claiming that the recording was inadmissible because it had been made without her client's knowledge. But Wade was ready for that argument. Your Honor, the plaintiff has spent this entire trial submitting recordings that were made without my client's knowledge. She can't claim that evidence obtained through secret recordings is valid when it supports her case, but invalid when it contradicts her story. Judge Wells agreed. The recording was allowed as evidence. After Wade finished his presentation, I stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to add something. The courtroom was still trying to process what they had just heard. Betrayal was sitting frozen at the plaintiff's table, her carefully crafted image of a victim completely falling apart. My wife walked into this courtroom with edited videos, fake tears, and a story designed to destroy my reputation and steal everything I've worked for, I said. She thought I was too stupid to realize what she was doing. I then pulled out the folder containing printed screenshots from the security system logs. These documents show every time she accessed our security recordings over the past 6 months, every file she downloaded, every conversation she edited. This wasn't a desperate woman documenting abuse. This was calculated fraud. Judge Wells reviewed the access logs, comparing them to the dates of the arguments in question. The pattern was undeniable. Furthermore, I continued, the recording of her discussing this strategy with her friend proves this was premeditated fraud. She didn't document abuse. She manufactured it. Hoffman tried one last objection, but Judge Wells had heard enough. Counselor, your client has submitted deliberately falsified evidence to this court. That's perjury, and it's contempt of court. I'm dismissing this petition immediately. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. Earl Thompson started clapping from the gallery, and several other business owners joined in. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Judge Wells referred Betrayal's case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. The frozen accounts were released back to me within a week. Betrayal faced not only the collapse of her divorce case, but also mounting legal bills from both sides. She eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges in order to avoid prison time. She got probation, community service, and a permanent criminal record. Her dream of going to law school died with her felony conviction. The business bounced back faster than I had anticipated. The UPS contract came through just 2 weeks after the trial. It turned out they had been waiting to see how things resolved before making a decision. Word spread quickly through the logistics community about what had really happened, and we actually picked up 3 new accounts from competitors of Memphis Freight Solutions. 6 months later, I bought a new house outside of Memphis, closer to the warehouse. I kept the security system, though. Old habits die hard, and the trial had taught me the value of complete documentation. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, or the legal fees, or even the months of stress and uncertainty. It was realizing how long she had been planning all of this, and how carefully she had studied my reactions and vulnerabilities. But sometimes the people who think they know you best are the ones who underestimate what you're capable of when you have to protect everything you've built. These days, Patterson Freight Solutions is stronger than ever before. We have 22 trucks now, new contracts across 4 states, and a reputation for reliability that money just can't buy. Technology is only as smart as the person using it. And if you're going to try to play games with recordings, you better make absolutely sure you control all of the footage, not just the highlights that you think will serve your purpose. Trust is earned, without a doubt, but preparation, that's absolutely everything. The offer they made was everything.